Let's talk about why the land and expand strategy is broken. So, one of the things that CMOs that we know is that we have to be very pipeline driven. And one of the things that's interesting about creating new annual revenue, Forrester came out with a study a couple of years ago, and they identified that 73% of new annual revenue actually comes from existing clients. But we spend about 98% of the time focused on new logo development. So that's one thing, the amount of time and effort that we're putting in one direction versus the other. The other one is that it's getting harder and harder to conquest new logos. And we all know that it's 5 times easier, whatever the stat is, right, on expanding an existing client relationship. But one of the biggest reasons is the buyer today, the B2B buyer, is waiting longer and longer to even want to talk to us, right? And they've already picked their top 2 or 3. They mentally know who their winner is, and then they're talking to the organizations. And I think a big part of that is because of the loss of trust. And we're the selling organization. We're definitely going to put ourselves into the best light. And there was another study that came out just over a year ago that identified that 74% of B2B buyers, 74%, don't believe the customer evidence that we presented. So it's getting harder and harder to conquest new logos. And what I just wanted to do is I wanted to talk to you about, as a CMO and a C-level executive in the organization, we've got to confront this B2B trust gap, right, head on. And just how do you think about that, and how do you approach that in your business?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think most of the companies today actually go through this sort of balance in figuring out new logo versus the land versus the expand strategy. I think I'll start with the second part of your question, which is really the trust factor, because it's a critical part of whether it's a cross sell or a land aspect in making sure customers have trust in your brand, in who you are, and what you can offer for them. So I think I don't want to show my age in this process, but 20 years ago, right, if you had asked, the sale process was very much a relationship, right? You went to the customer side, you built that relationship and worked to build that trust so that you would be awarded the opportunity to deliver value for the customers. But I think over the past 10, 12 years, I think this notion of meeting the customers where they are, meeting the prospects where they are, is certainly a big part of how the things have evolved. And as a result, I think a big part of these tools like G2 Crowd, people know about that, right? There's IT Central Station for IT software decisions. And there's obviously big analyst firms like the Gartners, Forresters of the world, who have the customer voice represented in what they share with the buyers in the industry. So I think that's a big testament to customers or buyers or prospects, however you think about them, really leaning on their peers and what some of these big analysts are talking about and the direction of the outside in perspective as opposed to just listening to the companies trying to sell you stuff. So I think the peer to peer is certainly a very powerful phenomenon that just happened right over the past 10 years that I think has changed the way we engage the prospect, changed the way we engage the customer. So digital marketing is certainly a big part of that growth, is leveraging tools like the sixth sense, right? So knowing what the intent is of the buyer and being able to leverage those insights to be able to approach them where they are. So I think that's a big part of the reason why traditional approach to selling and marketing is not going to work, right? You got to meet the buyers and customers where they are in the journey that they are in. That's number one. I think the balance of the land and expand or new logos versus cross sell, I think it's important that every company, every organization has this notion of new logos because obviously you want to show the growth in your customer base, your install base. But at the same time, I think the prioritization and balance of what that is going to be year after year needs to be thought about from a true customer retention and expansion of that customer trust, advocacy, right? Even more a contributor for the company's success than just a new logo. So I think I could go on for another 10 minutes about this, but it's really important that people don't think about just landing, because the company's job doesn't end when you land the customer. So it's not just the buyer's journey. It needs to immediately transcend into a customer journey. And that's where I think companies are struggling, because they think of it as, oh, I've landed. That's the buyer's journey. I've caught them. And you end up being a shelf software and not knowing whether they've used it, not really giving them the value creation that they were expecting. And you lose the trust in that process a little bit. So, yeah, I'll pause there, because I think it is a very important balance that customers need to strike, and not very well done in many organizations today, because the focus is the land strategy for the most part.